Welcome back, everyone, to End of Life Conversations. I was like, and our week of musings, a week of wondering what is going on around the world in the realm of death and dying and grieving. And I am here to just wonder. Sam, I'm wondering what's on your heart.
Yeah. Talked a little bit about conversation has been up, I guess, all over the place lately. Regarding, I guess the way we put it was like emergent strategies, but I think
Which is a
how it
great book,
lands.
by the way.
Is it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
But really, like intergenerational community, intergenerational dynamics, um, youth movements, eldership, stuff like that. And it's such a big topic that I highly doubt we'll get through all of it today. And I would hope that this would be one that we could circle back to and explore deeply, because I think it's a really important piece
Yeah.
of visioning and forming a new way to be together.
Yeah. Yeah. So important. We've seen it in several of our organizations. This is kind of where the conversation started, I think, was that especially, I'm the elder here, so I'll just speak from the elder position that a lot of the organizations I'm a part of are still have been around for a long time, and a lot of the people who are participating in it are elders. And I think what the other thing that inspired it was that I went to the Bioneers Conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was so impressed because that's a good example of something that was started 40 years ago, or about 40 years ago. And a lot of the people who founded it are now my age, and they are doing a really good job of absolutely making it a priority to bring young people in. A couple thousand people were there. About 500 of them were youth that were invited, and a whole bunch of indigenous youth as well, and people of color. So they're walking to talk or talking to walk or whatever, because they really have taken that on, and they have a whole large group of youth, and the youth were so profoundly passionate, and I literally was crying every single time I heard from them, because they were so passionate and so doing such incredible work. And it just reminded me of how important that is. And there are other organizations that I'm a part of that are similarly weighted toward the elders. And so we need to, and what we've been talking about for years really is how, as elders, can we step back and really create a container and lift up the young people and allows things to emerge in a new way, and let go of all those things we're so comfortable holding on to. So that was kind of, part of where it came from.
A clarifying question.
Yeah, go.
Just a clarifying question for you, Akil. When you say that about 500, about half of these people were youth, I seem to remember you saying that those younger folks were also like presenting, not just in attendance, that they were doing a lot of the presentations. I think that's a key piece of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is not just, having a multi-generational coalition in attendance,
Right.
but allowing the young people who have things to say, who have lived enough life to learn, or even just witnessing the world. We could put a 5-year-old on the stage to talk about what, watching
what their
the bees die
experience
in their backyard, whatever, and we could
Right.
learn volumes and volumes about
No,
how to
they were
approach things.
not only invited, they were encouraged. And in fact, the executive director is a younger woman who's an indigenous woman. So she's like high up in the organization and creating this, specifically creating it. That's what I mean. They walk the talk, they really, and they had 4 keynotes by young women, young people. And then several of the, afternoon sessions were led by young people, most of them, in fact. So, it was really inspiring in that way.
I have a couple thoughts, and I think I'm just really curious about Historically, have we had younger people's voices lifted over the course of time? And if not, what has it, I was just thinking about the trajectory of a human life 100 years ago, right? Our lifetime was truncated, and, then the capitalist regime fell in, and every youthful person was trying to make the the capital for their own livelihood, for their own homes, to kind of recreate what they saw their elders doing. So their voices weren't amplified in large part, I think, because they were busy, right? And older people are like, well, now we're done and we have wisdom and we have, retired and fat and happy. Let's just make the world more for us. And so I don't know that I can think back personally to a time when youth's younger voices were amplified. Can you?
Well,
Not
not in the history of Western capitalism, no. You have to go back
and not in my
farther.
lifetime, certainly.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think even, I don't know, even like 50 years ago, what you're saying too about the shorter lifespan or things like that, like people who were in their 20s, 30s, were like
Middle-aged.
leading organizations,
Yes.
CEOs of organizations.
Right.
I was listening to a really interesting, odd deep dive into the infamous music producer Phil Spector last night.
Mhm.
And for all the weird, complicated pieces of that human being, by the time he was 21, he was revolutionizing the music industry in Hollywood
Mhm.
and signing and recording some of the biggest bands in the world and like partying with the Beatles and stuff like that. So like having, currently in a lot of the organizations that I'm a part of, youth is including people up to like 50 years old.
Yeah.
40 to 50 years old, because there's so few people left. That's a whole other dynamic to talk about. To fill out the next generation and the youth roles, that it just becomes big. And I think there's benefit in that, because we can say the young at hearts. But it's just it's interesting, I think, as a more recent development, that power and holding on to control and power has, the age range has narrowed and moved to older, like over 60.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
house ownership, the average homeowner,
Right.
first time home buyer right now is like 60.
Yeah, it's gone up. Yeah, and if you think about all these titans of industry, if you will, Bill Gates and all these billionaires that are making our lives horrible right now, and the Epstein class, if you will, you're right, they all started gathering their capitalist power when they were young. And they've carried it and they've held on to it and they've grabbed it tight and held on to it and sucked up everything, since then, to where now they're the most powerful people on the planet and abusing that power for the most part, and have been. So that also begs the question: what could change? What can we do to help that not be the dynamic going forward? To create a new group of entrepreneurs or a new group of leaders with morals and with ethics and with this that know that they're part of everybody and are united and want to work for the benefit of everybody instead of just themselves. And
Right.
that's like a disease, I think, that is part of capitalism, that I think maybe in a way you could almost trace it to that it blossomed in the 60s or 50s maybe, and it blossomed into those people, and now they're carrying that forward, and we got to and to start over again. How do we start over again? That's a very good question. Very good thought.
Well, and I'm going to just pipe in that both of you know I homeschooled my kids. And when I got pregnant and was very scared about becoming a mother because I've never had a good role model for mothering. So I thought, this is so frightening. But, the spirit who led me in that moment said, you are a teacher, so don't worry about it. And so when I was homeschooling the kids, I actually realized that they had so much to teach me as well.
Yeah.
Even as 2, 3, 5, 7, 10-year-olds, they had a voice, like Sam was saying, that is noticing aspects of this lived experience that is very different, and bringing in different questions and different wonderings. So I raise these kids being like, you have a voice. You can sit at the table and also have a discussion about politics or the world or whatever, because I want to hear from you too. What I've noticed when they were out in the world, though, is that people tend to diminish them and their voices are infantilized, or it's not the time, or, I'm not that interested. And I even called a teacher out on it when I sent my kids to Guatemala to be in school. I was like, hey, man, don't be ageist. Because you're 50 doesn't necessarily mean you're the smartest person in the room. To acknowledge that there's a spectrum of experiences, right? So I think in this country, but then there's this other, it's bifurcated into this piece that either we allow all voices to be heard and held with respect, or we don't teach young voices to speak respectfully to be heard. So, because I've also witnessed young kids who demand to be heard and insist that they are right, that you as the adult don't know what you're talking about. And I've heard them. I'm like, whoa, like my dude, let's stay a little curious to what this reality is for both of us.
Yeah.
And so, it's about, I think, expanding the possibility that age does not mean wisdom. Age does not mean knowledge. And, to be curious to each of us who carry a seed of something is important, right? So I think that we have to retrain people how to see each other and how to teach each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Respectful listening. Yeah.
Yeah. And also on the other end, I spend a lot of time with folks in their 70s, and sometimes I have to call them out because I'm like, will you just shut up? Like,
Right.
You've told me this story a few times now, and you center our conversations only on your experience.
Yeah.
I am not hearing you ask questions, and I'm not hearing you say, this is how I experienced this. What about your experience? And I have 2 people I can think of right now that I was like, hey, listen, learn to listen,
Yeah. Yeah.
and think about where you center our relationship. Is it just about your experiences, or is it about the world experiences? So it's a both and on both ends of the spectrum.
Absolutely.
And that's an enculturation thing too. Like people were
Yes.
not this whole generation, with exceptions, but largely an entire generation not taught emotional intelligence and
Yeah.
self-reflection and
That's
this
so true.
healthy relating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have conversations with my mom all the time
Oh.
about my grandparents like that, and how they interact and see every interaction through their own lens without an understanding of who the other person is.
Yeah.
Everything is just a projection of who they perceive themselves to be.
That's right.
Unreflectively who they see themselves to be,
Yeah.
which creates a whole tangle of things. But Ana Luisa, I love what you're talking about, is like standing in between these two communities.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that we're talking about, and the issue at hand is the division of generational relationships. You talk about like the capitalist sort of machine and the mechanization of humanity. We're chopped up into age cohorts, and we don't
That's
really
right.
interact with anyone
That's
outside
right.
of that. But when you were talking about the entitlement of small children and the entitlement of elders, is there's not this mutually respectful relationship. And so the young people who are rising see that the elders don't respect their voices. I mean, we can see this
Right.
in geopolitics too, right?
Right.
You know, any rising voice is like, oh, shut up. Oh, you know, we're not going to listen to you. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And so it creates an adversarial relationship
It's
where the
not
youth are
even
like, you're
shut
not
up.
fucking listening to me. I
Yeah.
have good ideas. Let
Yeah.
me speak my good ideas. And nope, I'm not listening. You don't
Right.
know, you know. And
It's
then
just like a turning away from too, is what I noticed. It's like
right.
not even
Yes.
like diminishing the voices. It's just like,
You don't exist.
hark, my world and my knowledge and my powers.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
See ya.
I would love to hear from Sam, you know, one of the things that opens up is, what would it look like from your perspective as a younger person? And on Louisa too, really, what would it look like for elders to be, to hold that container, to be respectful, and to how would you recommend, or how would you suggest elders start thinking about being open to carrying? I guess the best model that I hear is this container, holding the container, because we have wealth, we have some wisdom anyway, some experience at least, and that gives us some tools with which we can support and lift up the younger people in our lives. And I would love to hear from you guys about that.
But Wakil, you just also said it's like you are supporting others, right? And that languaging also gives you a power dynamic that you have to support others without letting them also support you, right?
Yeah, that's
And
important.
so it's a mutual engagement. But what I was thinking about as you were saying that, we've also lost our mentoring framework, where elders knew they were going to be dying. They had to pass down, you know, how do we tend the land? How do we collect our medicine? How do we do our prayers? What is important in our community that I have held that I am trying to train you to do? So the mentoring and training and elevating is not necessarily like, well, hey, like I have this, you know, thing, like, you know, let me give this in bits and pieces to you. It's more like, hey, I got work to do. You want to come with me?
Yeah,
You know?
companionship. It comes back to companionship. Yeah.
And I think that's a huge part of it. I think mentorship and advising is a big piece of it. It takes a lot of internal work, I think.
And it's advising for both each other, right? Like we're noticing. We also have the chance to say, hey, like I notice this happens a lot. Do you know this? And then there's like a self-reflection time. It's like, you know, and so then there's like the mentoring goes a little different way that you thought you had started.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's been my experience for sure. Yeah.
And I think it's important to bring up the power differential, because like, yes, there is a mutual service relationship that needs to happen and can happen. And there is a real material difference in power between the older generations and the younger generations. We don't have the level of accumulated and generated wealth.
Yeah.
We've gone through two major, or in the midst of the second or third, like major recession. The amount of like wealth funneling towards the wealthiest. And so there's fewer opportunities to seed and begin wealth, like buying a house.
Yeah.
Right.
Simply buying a house, or, you know, not being saddled with student debt, things like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that questions about material support from older generations to younger generations is a critical piece.
Yeah.
Organizationally or whatever, like, and it comes back to, I know I've talked about it before, but also dealing with the amount of accumulation that goes to people who are unconcerned and hoarding wealth. And so, like, yes, the older generation has more, but it's still not a lot, and it's less than it was. And so we're still trading a smaller amount of the general pot if we're doing this work. And so there's larger systemic things that need to happen. But that's another
Mhm.
conversation.
Yeah, and let me just start with this
Yeah.
the smaller pot too. And what I hear from some folks whom I know have generated surplus capital for their
Mhm.
lives, and they want it to go to only their families.
Mm.
They
Right.
don't want to extend it out into the world because, on some level, it must be a primal desire to like keep it in the family, right?
Tribal. Yeah.
It's very tribal. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, it's true. And, that scarcity mindset with capital becomes, yeah, it's a very interesting perspective but carry on, Sam.
Mhm. Um, yeah, I mean that harkens to the general atomization too.
Mhm.
That there isn't an understanding of like collective empowerment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And um and I think, I mean, God, I saw an infographic the other day talking about generational wealth and saying like all the people who are counting on their family's wealth or looking forward to generational wealth don't understand that all of that or most of that wealth for most people is going to go to end of life care.
Mhm. Oh,
It's
yeah.
going to go to the
Yeah.
private
Wow.
end of life industry, and it's going to line the
Right.
pockets of those
Wow. Corporations.
capitalists,
Yeah.
Yeah.
corporations, capitalists, whatever.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then on the other side of that, we have two, one, two, maybe Gen X and lower who don't have that built wealth. And
Yeah,
we
we
don't have
don't.
end of life care that is not absurdly, exorbitantly expensive,
Right.
Right. Yeah.
designed to drain all of the wealth out of the
Yeah.
aging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? And so
Mm.
I think uh, that circles back to what you're talking about, Ana Luisa, is the mutual service piece.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And there's looking outside of like money and capitalist paradigms of building wealth and resilience because the pot is so small. And I
Mhm.
realized as I was saying that, and as you were responding to it, that I got caught in the trap of money is the way out.
Mm.
And I don't
Mhm.
think that money is necessarily the way out.
Mhm.
We have the wealth in each other and in
Mm.
our
Mhm.
access and
We do.
presence in the world. And so if we can build relational value,
Yeah.
Right.
we can make the lack of money resources obsolete in many ways by
Yeah.
taking care of each other.
Right. I'm gonna step in because this has been on my mind for the last week. It's been bothering me a lot. So we know that I do and death care, body care. I've done this for free because, I get calls and I'm like, oh, let's do this. Uh, the funeral home, unnamed funeral home, charges $1,800 just for that service.
Wow.
$1,800 just for that service. I just noticed that they're teaching classes about that. They've trademarked it. They actually trademarked this piece, and they're charging like $350 per person to learn how to do this. Which was on the heels of me sitting one morning thinking, how can I make money, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
I also really love this work, and I want everybody to know how to do this work because it is so holy. It's
Yeah.
so when people experience it, they're like, "This is the best thing I've ever done," or, "I want this for my family." So, I was like, "I'll just charge like $90 or something or get," like, I don't know, whatever, a sliding
Yeah.
scale, and especially for our community of color. And, so I've been just like rankled by gatekeepers around the death and dying industry. So
Oh, it's
when you
sad.
say,
Yeah.
when you talk about mutual aid for each other, we all have to teach each other.
Mhm.
And it won't be about monetizing that moment. It's about how do we care for each other? And
Yeah.
this is what it means, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it has been really upsetting to me how I have noticed the death care industry become more and more capitally oriented,
Yeah.
leaving
Absolutely.
the POC communities, LGBTQ communities, not very like poor communities left out of it. It's super
Absolutely.
sexy for our death care, from this cool boutique, funeral home. And I'm like, death is for everyone.
Death is
It should
for
be
everyone. I love that. Death is for everyone.
Death is for everybody gets to do it.
Trademark that.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, so you can make some money. It occurred to me as we were talking about this, the people amongst the elder group, like the ones at Pioneers or ourselves, who have the will and the intention and the caring and the that are in that mindset, are not the ones who accumulated the money in the first place. That's
right.
And so that pot is smaller, really. I mean, all of the people that I met at Pioneers are literally giving everything away as much as they can, giving their time, their money, they're very, very, but they don't have the billionaires. The billionaires are not on board with this. The billionaires don't have those values, right? They're the tribal, still holding that tribal and that fear space of, if I don't hoard this, something bad's going to happen. It really comes right down.
I don't even think it's a bad thing. I think it's just like, look at me and my piles.
Well, I mean, I was
dragon
mentality. Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day who's saying, actually my teacher the other day, who was saying, if you look at, I'm not going to say his name out loud, he who shall not be named.
Voldemort.
Voldemort. It's such a perfect, horrible example of the dark side of all of us needing to be seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that whole deep, deep, deep part of ourselves that when we were born wanted to make sure our mother knew where we were, and needed to be noticed and still need to be noticed. And if it goes to the absolute worst possible way, you get a person who is wanting to put his name on everything and, wanting to have gold and wanting to have his name on the dollar. I mean, everything. And it's just such an example of that fear of not being seen. And that also leads to this financial need, this need to grab on and hold on and make sure everybody knows you're the one who's in charge. I'm trying right now, I'm scrolling through my Substack because there's an article I just read, which I really loved. And I think I'll put it in the podcast notes, by a person we're going to be interviewing, Paula something, and I wish I could find it and remind myself.
Give us a gist and tell us what it's about.
Yeah, we'll find it. But she writes a lot about the way hospice is broken down. She writes about end of life stuff, and she's been accused of dumping on hospice. But she's very clear in this article. I'm not dumping on hospice. I'm talking about the way hospice has been taken over by the capitalist system and fails because of that. And because they are after money instead of taking care of people. It used to be a nonprofit organization that was there for caring and compassionate care. And now it's been taken over and it's all about the money. In fact, everything is about, cutting back on staff, getting as many visits in as possible, making sure you document it and get your money, and I witnessed that. You've witnessed that. Anybody who's worked in hospice has witnessed that. So what she said was exactly right on. And what was good is at the end, she talked about got to where we're getting to right now. What it has to come back down to, and all of it comes back down to, is we cannot expect the billionaires to bail us out or the government to bail us out of this or to change what they're doing. They're not going to change. And what is in our capacity to make a difference is to start gathering together at mutual aid groups, taking care of each other, recreating that compassionate care way of being with each other. So we could do that with hospice. We could do that with end of life care. There's a nonprofit I'm working on right now, to just gather people together and say, who will be willing to help in the legal parts, who will be willing to help in the burial parts, who will be willing to help in any of these parts as a community. And instead of expecting the government to change or the billionaires to change, we kind of have to let that one go, I think.
Well, it's not even that we have to. How do you make sure what?
How do we make sure that the person providing those services doesn't lose their house and has enough to eat, and can get to where they need to be doing this work? It's the other side of it. Or
they volunteer for a year or so, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to make money off of this, and I'm going to start trademarking it, and I'll sell it. Because I see that with psilocybin, with all kinds of spiritual work. Every freaking person who does a weekend event is going back out there and
Yep.
being like, I am now I mean, I've gotten calls from somebody who's like, I just brought back 70 pounds of cacao. You know, I want to start doing ceremony. Can you help me? And I'm like, no,
Absolutely
No.
not. It's that grind. It's that
No.
grind set thing too. Monetize all your hobbies. Monetize it's and the neoliberal mentality of commodify everything.
Yeah.
Everything has to become an extractive, monetized thing.
Mhm,
Everything,
mhm.
and it's
Yeah.
it just kills the soul of everything.
So it does. And I'm going to, before we got on, Wakil and I were sharing with Sam about the Center for End of Life project in Crestone, Colorado, who has the most beautiful funeral pyre. I
Yeah.
am in love with this place.
The only one like it in the United
And
States.
more than anything is when I talked to Melina, I spent a lot of time talking to Melina both prior to the meeting and the next morning. But she talked about how many people volunteer for this. She's like, we've got 250 volunteers, say. I don't remember the number, but it's a big number. The email goes out, you know, somebody in our community is transitioning. If you have time, like slide into your lane, right?
Mm-hmm,
And they have like people who show up for body care after the body's gone. There's like all these little small jobs that are like, fill it in, you know, just put your name in it. To the point that they actually have people who do parking attendants on the day of the funeral, who
Yeah.
do the cleaning and the sprucing up of the funeral pyre, to collecting the juniper bundles. But she's like, it takes all of us to
Yeah.
do one funeral, and they charge like $500.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, in that community, that's a small community. So there's probably half the people in the community are participating in this at some point.
That's right. That's
Which
right.
is
And for
just
people
awesome.
they hardly know, right? So
Yeah, yeah. And that comes back to who were we talking to that was talking about the African
yeah.
way, you know, the village shows up.
Even if it is to just bring a chicken.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Somebody brings a chicken, somebody brings the kindling, somebody brings the water to
Yeah.
boil the pot to boil. Like there are small pieces that we can all just like, you know, slide into and do the thing. And we've helped.
Yeah, exactly.
Many hands makes light work.
Yeah. I think we could talk about this for a lot longer, and maybe we could put a, you know, call this
Put a pin in it.
call this part 1, and let's
Don't
do
call
part
it
2.
anything. You just have a conversation.
We will
don't
have
need a
more of this conversation, I think.
Let's have more of this
We will
conversation.
continue.
Tune
We will
in.
continue when it comes up again. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe next
Stay
time.
tuned.
All right. Thank you all. You guys are
Adios.
amazing. I love you all so much. And all of you out there.
Yes. I love
Like
you too.
and subscribe. Do all the things.
Yeah.
Conversations about the end of life.